Why is showing off the worst thing you can do? It sounds counterintuitive in a world where everyone is posting, announcing, and documenting every step, from career moves to weekend meals. But that's exactly why silence has become a form of power. The moment you crave recognition, you start living for the gaze of others. The moment you reveal what you're building too soon, you give up the advantage that could have taken you further. Quietly, strategically, and effectively. You don't need to disappear from the world, but you do need to know when to speak and when to let your actions speak for themselves. Not out of fear that others will steal your idea, but because stillness and discretion are the only real shields while your vision is still taking shape. This video will show you why showing off is one of the most common ways people weaken themselves without realizing it. And if you listen long enough, you'll see that change doesn't come from a clever quote. It comes from the quiet discipline of how you carry yourself every single day. So don't just listen once. Come back to this anytime you feel the urge to prove something, to post for applause, to announce before you've built. Share it with a friend. Someone who needs to remember that silence isn't weakness, it's survival. And if this message speaks to something deep in you, leave a comment, subscribe, and let this be your daily reminder. You don't need to perform to be powerful. You just need to keep building in silence. 1. The more you show, the easier you are to hit. Why is it that every time you speak your goals out loud, especially online, there's a quiet discomfort that follows? It's not fear, it's recognition. A part of you knows you've just given away something that wasn't ready to be exposed. You've handed people a piece of your direction, your vision, and in doing so, you've given them something to measure, question, or quietly dismantle. In today's world, where sharing is the default and silence is mistaken for weakness, we forget a basic truth. The more visible your intention, the more vulnerable it becomes. You're not hiding when you stay quiet. You're protecting the foundation before the structure can rise. People don't need to destroy you. Often, you do it yourself the moment you trade your inner clarity for external attention. That moment you share a big move before it's been fully lived or tested, you invite forces that pull you off course. Opinions, pressure, silent envy, and the creeping need to now live up to a performance you haven't fully become. And worst of all, you lose something internal. The sharpness that only exists when you're focused, not watching. This isn't paranoia. This is a strategy. Even Machiavelli understood that power is not what you show, but what others can't see. When you reveal your hand, your thoughts, your next play, you're no longer dangerous. You're manageable, predictable, easy to hit. The Stoics taught restraint not just in emotion, but in presence. Marcus Aurelius never wrote for public applause. He wrote in silence to sharpen his thinking. Seneca warned that public praise is fleeting and that peace comes from inward mastery. What's relevant now is not ancient text, but the timeless principle behind it. Control your exposure or be controlled by it. In the digital age, people leak their ambitions in the name of authenticity, but what they're really doing is giving away the advantage. Every goal shared prematurely is a door opened too soon. Every plan posted becomes a path that can be blocked. You don't need enemies when you hand them the map yourself. And this isn't just theory. You've seen it. Maybe you've lived it. A friend starts a business, and before the first sale, the entire brand identity is on display. The logo, the website, the vision statement. Weeks later, they disappear. Not because they lack talent, but because they mistook exposure for momentum. Another person announces a new lifestyle change. The fitness journey, the early wake-up habit, the book they'll write. But the act of telling gives a false sense of achievement, and when the real work starts, they no longer feel the drive. Why? Because the validation came too early, and validation without result is a trap. You begin to feel seen for something you haven't earned yet, and instead of doing the work, you perform the image. True power doesn't move like that. True power is quiet, calculated, and often underestimated. And that's the point. When people can't read you, they hesitate. When they can't predict you, they react more slowly. When they don't know your next move, they can't block it. You're not feared because you speak loudly. You're feared because you move silently. Silence is not the absence of motion. It's the protection of motion. It's the clarity to build without interruption, to act without noise, to rise without needing a stage. In silence, you gain focus. In silence, you conserve energy. And most importantly, in silence, you let results speak in a tone no performance can match. So if you feel the urge to announce what you're planning, pause. Ask yourself, do I need to say this, or do I just want to be seen? Do I want results, or do I want recognition? Because in the long run, the ones who win are rarely the loudest. They're the ones who stayed quiet long enough for their work to become undeniable. And when that happens, they don't need to explain. The silence they held becomes the respect they now command. 2. Silence isn't weakness, it's a strategy. A storm doesn't send a warning before it breaks the sky. A cat doesn't growl before it strikes. A sniper never yells, "I'm here," before pulling the trigger. But somehow, we've been trained to believe that staying quiet means we're losing ground, that if we don't speak up, we'll be misunderstood. That silence is a form of weakness, and yet the most dangerous moves in life are always the quietest. Not because they're hidden out of fear, but because they're designed with intention. In silence, there is space to breathe, to observe, and to decide without pressure. That space is where real control lives. Not control over others, but over yourself. And in a world that rushes to explain, to prove, to declare, control is rare. And that's what makes it powerful. Every time you speak, you commit to a version of yourself. Every explanation is a signal. Every sentence becomes a thread others can pull. You're not just sharing, you're opening doors that might not be ready to be opened. The louder you are, the more predictable you become. But when you say less, people guess. And in that guessing, they reveal themselves. They show their expectations, their insecurities, their intentions, while you remain unreadable. This is not manipulation, it's discipline. It's mental clarity through restraint, and it gives you something few people ever develop: leverage. Not because you dominate the room, but because your silence holds weight. In ordinary life, this shows up in ways you can recognize. The person who talks the most in a meeting isn't always the one people respect. The person who keeps correcting others, explaining their worth, defending every move. They may be seen, but they're not felt. Meanwhile, the one who sits back, listens, waits, and speaks only when it matters. They shift the room without force. Why? Because the fewer the words, the heavier they land. And when your words carry weight, people pause before pushing. They calculate before questioning. You command space not by taking it, but by being selective with what you reveal. That's not weakness, that's quite a strength. The Stoics understood this long before the noise of modern life. They trained themselves not to react, not to speak from impulse, to observe without jumping to judgment, to move with inner direction, not external pressure. And today, that mindset is more vital than ever. We live in a time where silence is mistaken for absence, and where everyone feels compelled to explain who they are and what they're doing. But explanation is often a cage. Once you declare something, you lock yourself into proving it, whether it still fits you or not. And often, what begins as an honest statement becomes a burden you drag behind you. Silence, on the other hand, keeps you free to pivot, to change, to grow, without asking permission. There's also protection in silence. Not everything needs a response. Not every challenge deserves a counter. When you resist the urge to speak just to be heard, you create emotional discipline. You separate what needs to be said from what only serves the ego. You stop reacting and start deciding. And in doing so, you build something few people ever touch: unshakable inner peace. That doesn't mean you never speak. It means you wait until silence no longer serves the moment. Then, and only then, you speak with precision. Because the truth is, people don't remember noise. They remember the impact. They don't remember who spoke the most. They remember who spoke at the right time with the right weight. And that weight is only earned through restraint. Not every moment calls for a voice. Some moments call for stillness, for sharp listening, for watching how others reveal themselves without ever knowing they're being read. And that stillness is not passive. It is active, focused, and sharp. It's what makes the quiet man unshakable and the silent strategy impossible to stop. 3. Living for approval is the weakest way to live. There was a time when I couldn't do anything without wondering if someone would notice. I'd read a book and feel the need to share it. I'd work late and find myself tempted to tell someone, not because I was proud of the effort, but because I didn't want it to go unseen. It wasn't about showing off, it was deeper than that. It was fear. I feared that if no one acknowledged my discipline, it somehow didn't count. But slowly, that fear became exhaustion. Because chasing approval is like drinking salt water. The more you try to quench your thirst, the more it consumes you. At some point, I forgot what I even wanted for myself. My actions became reactions, responses to expectations I had allowed others to place on me. I wasn't building a life. I was curating a version of it, waiting for validation to tell me I was on the right path. But here's the truth I wish I had seen sooner. When you live for approval, you give away your power. You become a reflection instead of a force, a mirror to other people's preferences. And mirrors, no matter how polished, shatter easily. There is no peace in a life shaped by applause. You may get the nods, the compliments, even admiration, but none of it lasts. Because the moment you stop feeding it, it turns silent. And silence feels unbearable when you've trained yourself to need noise. That's when the anxiety creeps in. That's when you overthink every move. That's when you start chasing not your purpose, but the next reaction. It's a prison dressed in praise, and it's more dangerous than failure. At least when you fail on your own terms, you still belong to yourself. But when you succeed only through approval, you belong to everyone but you. The Stoics knew this danger well. They spoke of emotional independence, of freeing yourself from the need to be praised, just as much as from the fear of being judged. Because freedom isn't about being seen, it's about no longer needing to be. And that shift changes everything. You stop explaining, you stop performing, you stop needing to prove you're trying. And in that silence, your true reasons rise. Not for reward, not for recognition, but for the quiet fire that only you can feel. Living for approval also warps your standards. You measure success by applause instead of substance. You abandon meaningful progress for visible gestures. You start to believe that impact requires attention, but the most powerful acts are rarely visible. The man who shows up daily to build discipline, who keeps promises no one tracks, who protects his energy instead of spreading it thin for validation. He is powerful not because others say so, but because he knows so. That kind of power cannot be taken, only surrendered. And we surrender it each time we need to be told we matter. You can reclaim it, but it begins with quiet rebellion. You stop announcing, you stop justifying, you stop asking if this is good enough for them, and you start asking if this is true enough for you. That's when life simplifies. That's when strength returns. Because now, the applause doesn't own you. The silence doesn't scare you. And the work, real work, begins to feel lighter. Because you no longer carry the weight of everyone else's eyes. Approval is a shadow. You can never catch it. But presence, discipline, quiet clarity, those are yours. And they are more than enough. Let others guess, let them wonder, let them ask what you're up to. You don't owe them an answer, not because you're hiding, but because you're living. And when you live for yourself, you become untouchable. Not louder, not flashier, just free. 4. The most dangerous person in the room is the quiet one. We're taught to associate loud with strong. The one who speaks the most, commands the room, pushes their opinions without pause. Surely they hold power. But time and experience reveal something else entirely. In almost every room, it's the quiet one who unsettles people the most. The one who watches, listens, and doesn't interrupt. At first, they seem passive. But as moments pass, you realize they're not behind. They're ahead. Not because they dominate, but because they observe. And observation is power. In silence, they're calculating. While others scramble to be heard, they're already 5 moves ahead. Calm, composed, unreadable. Think about a meeting you've been in. There's always that one person who barely speaks. But when they do, everything shifts. Their words are fewer, but sharper. They don't fill the room with noise. They cut through it with clarity. And that's what makes them dangerous. Not in the violent sense, but in the strategic sense. While noise seeks attention, silence builds intention. The person who doesn't need to be noticed is the one who's hardest to control. You can't predict them, you can't manipulate them, and you certainly can't prepare for them, because they give nothing away. In martial arts, the most skilled fighter is rarely the first to strike. He studies you. He conserves his energy. He waits, not because he's afraid, but because he knows he only needs one move, executed with perfect timing, to win. The same applies in life. Those who react to everything, who argue, who explain, who correct, they're loud, yes, but also exposed. Their emotions are on display. Their intentions are easy to read. But the quiet person, you never know what they're thinking. And that's exactly why everyone adjusts around them. This doesn't mean silence is always a sign of strength. It must be paired with clarity, with intention, with discipline. The quiet that's born from fear is weakness disguised. But the quiet that's born from confidence, from mastery, from inner peace, that is the most formidable kind. Because that silence isn't empty, it's full of awareness, full of restraint, full of calm power. The Stoics understood this well. They believed in holding the inner line, that if you control your response, you control the dynamic. If you don't need to prove anything, you become untouchable. We live in a culture where being underestimated is often seen as an insult. But to a strategic mind, it's a gift. When people don't see you coming, they can't prepare to resist you. When they don't know your thoughts, they can't counter your moves. And when you don't reveal your hand, you always hold the advantage. That's why the quiet one is so unsettling. They don't play the game everyone else is playing. While others trade visibility for approval, the quiet one trades silence for freedom. They move with restraint, not because they're hiding, but because they're grounded. And that grounding makes them unpredictable. The truth is, in any setting, be it business, relationships, or conflict, the person who speaks least is often the one with the most control. Not because they dominate, but because they refuse to be reactive. And in a reactive world, that's rare. That's power. Their emotional detachment, their mental clarity, their inner strength. It radiates not in words, but in presence. You feel it when they enter the room. You notice the stillness. It demands nothing, but commands everything. That's the paradox. The more they withhold, the more influence they carry. So the next time you're in a room full of noise, don't rush to speak. Don't perform. Don't try to match energy with energy. Instead, ground yourself. Watch, wait, think. Speak only when it moves the conversation with precision. Because in the end, the most powerful person isn't the one who speaks the loudest. It's the one who doesn't need to. 5. Revealing your goals too soon destroys them. Imagine this. You've just made a bold decision. Maybe it's to lose 30 pounds, or finally start that business idea you've been quietly shaping for years. Maybe it's to leave your job, move to a new place, or break free from a cycle that no longer fits who you are. And in that private, sacred moment, when it's just you and your decision, you feel a rare kind of power. A clarity, a shift. But then you tell someone. You mention it to a friend, or worse, you announce it to everyone. And in doing so, something happens. Quietly, almost invisibly, the energy begins to drain. You haven't taken a single step yet, but you already feel some relief, as if sharing the intention somehow counts as movement. As if saying the words out loud is the same as doing the work. But it isn't, and that's the trap. When we speak too soon, we give ourselves a premature reward. A pat on the back without having earned it. That false sense of progress kills momentum. Because the desire to act came from inner fire, and once it's out in the open, exposed to reactions, doubts, praise, or silence, it weakens. What was once clear becomes cluttered with outside noise. Not only that, but goals are fragile in their infancy. They need space. They need privacy. Like seeds, they grow better in the dark, in silence, away from the wind of opinions and the glare of validation seeking. Every time you share, you invite interference. Some people won't believe in you. Others will offer advice laced with their fears. Some might copy you and rush ahead. Most won't mean harm. But their presence, your awareness of being watched, can change everything. Instead of acting freely, you begin performing. You start checking if your progress looks good to others, and the original fire, pure, undiluted, is lost. There's a reason the Stoics believed in detachment from outcome. When you fixate on the result, especially in the eyes of others, you become enslaved by it. But when you act in silence, with focus, without needing acknowledgement, you become unstoppable. There's no pressure to impress, no fear of embarrassment if you change direction, just movement. Quiet, powerful, clear. Real progress lives in those moments when no one is watching. That's when your mind is sharpest. That's when your strength is real, not borrowed from applause. It doesn't mean you should never share anything. It means you must protect your early intentions with care. Build in silence. Let your actions speak so loud you won't need to. Don't announce your plan to lose weight. Just show up every day and train. Don't talk about writing a book. Just write. Don't explain how you're going to reinvent your life. Just start and let the new version of you explain it through presence. Every word you say about your goal is energy that could have gone into doing. And energy is finite. Use it wisely, because the world doesn't owe you support. It doesn't owe you understanding. Your goal doesn't get stronger by being seen. It gets stronger by being done. Let people see the result, not the blueprint. Let them wonder how you did it. Let your silence become the proof. The more you talk, the more room there is for doubt, delay, and distraction. The less you speak, the deeper your roots go. Protect your dreams like they're sacred. Because they are. Especially in their early stages, when they're still forming, still delicate. Don't feed them to the crowd. Feed them discipline. Feed them patience. Feed them quiet action, day after day, until one day they rise above the surface, not because you told everyone, but because you showed up when no one knew. And that, more than anything, is what builds a life that speaks for itself. 6. Results. Earn respect, not words. So I'm writing a book. Oh, nice. How many chapters have you finished? None yet. But I've got the idea and the title. Sounds familiar? We live in a time where everyone seems to be working on something. A podcast in the making. A business is coming soon. A lifestyle change has already been posted about, but not yet lived. But if you lean in closer, most of it is noise. Intention dressed as action. Conversation in place of commitment. The idea of doing becomes more intoxicating than doing itself. And in that illusion, progress disappears. What remains is the comfort of being seen trying, without the pressure of actually doing. It's easy to speak about goals, easy to announce future plans. But results, those can't be faked. They don't lie, they don't stutter, they don't need decoration. A finished project speaks louder than 1,000 promises. And here's the part most people miss. Those who are truly building rarely talk much. Not because they're secretive, but because they're too focused. They don't need to convince anyone. They're too deep in the work. While others are rehearsing their elevator pitches, they're laying bricks in silence. While some are mapping out logos and taglines, they're solving real problems, enduring real setbacks, and staying up late to meet real deadlines. The gap widens not through words, but through repetition, effort, and invisible grind. In the end, results command silence. The person who walks into the room with a finished manuscript doesn't need to say, "I'm a writer." The art says it. The pages speak. The one who has transformed their body doesn't owe anyone a speech. The results radiate. They become the proof. And that's what earns respect, because when something is real, people feel it. They don't need to be convinced. This is the quiet strength most ignore. We chase recognition through talk, not knowing that the more we talk, the less people expect from us. Words without results become background noise, and soon people stop listening. Or worse, they start doubting. You become the person with endless plans and no completions, the one who's always about to. Eventually, your words lose power because they've never delivered anything solid. That's how respect fades, not in one dramatic failure, but in the slow erosion caused by repeated declarations with no follow-through. But the opposite is also true. Deliver once, and silence becomes your ally. You won't need validation. You'll become your own proof. Your discipline will carry weight. Your consistency will cast a longer shadow than your words ever could. When people start seeing the fruit, they'll stop questioning the seed. They'll no longer ask what you're doing. They'll ask how you did it. This mindset is ancient. The Stoics knew this well. They taught that talking too much about your virtue is a sign you don't have enough of it. In the same way, when you need to declare your greatness before it's visible, you're still seeking something outside yourself: approval, applause, safety. But real builders don't crave that. They crave progress. They crave mastery. They crave the calm that comes from knowing, not from being known. So, the next time you catch yourself wanting to explain, wanting to impress, wanting to declare, pause. Ask yourself, what have I actually done? What can I show that requires no introduction? Let your actions do the talking. Let your silence create anticipation. Because when it's time to speak, you won't need to. You'll point calmly and say, "I built this." And in that moment, even your critics will fall silent, not because they agree, but because they can't deny it. And that is respect earned, the only way it truly lasts, not through noise, but through proof. 7. The more someone shows off, the more they're missing inside. A full cup is quiet, but shake an empty one, and it rattles. The same is true with people. The louder the display, the more desperate the need behind it. You've seen it before. Someone who constantly flashes their car, their relationship, their job title. Every sentence starts with a flex. Every encounter feels like a performance, and at first glance, you might even think they're ahead. But wait a little longer. Watch closely. Often within weeks, the illusion fades. The car is leased. The relationship was hollow. The confidence was borrowed. Because noise can't hold weight, it only echoes what's missing. People who are truly grounded don't announce it. They don't walk into a room and declare power. They carry it, and people feel it. Without needing an explanation, their presence is felt. Not because they're loud, but because they're whole. They don't seek applause. They don't rush to prove. They don't confuse visibility with value. In fact, the more whole a person is inside, the less they need to be seen. That's the paradox. The ones who carry deep inner peace rarely feel the urge to advertise their success, because they don't need the world to validate what they already know. Now look again at those who constantly seek attention. At first, you may feel envy. You might feel like they're ahead of you, but with time and stillness, the illusion dissolves. Boasting is a shield. Overexposure is a cover. When someone feels enough inside, they don't display the surface to feel complete. But when the inside is hollow, the surface must work overtime. And that's why showing off is rarely about celebration. It's about survival. It's about filling the silence they can't face. So they use noise. They use attention. But like a fire built on dry twigs, it burns fast and fades quickly. The Stoics understood this long before modern psychology. They saw that true power is quiet. Seneca wrote, "The greatest blessings of mankind are within us and within our reach. Not on display, not in public applause, but within." And when you know this, when you start cultivating strength from the inside, your need to show off fades. You begin to move with calm precision. You begin to choose silence over performance. And most of all, you begin to notice the show in others and see it for what it is, a mirror of their unmet needs. And here's the cost no one talks about. The more someone shows off, the more pressure they create for themselves. Because once you present a perfect life, you must maintain that illusion. Even if your peace is collapsing, even if your relationship is crumbling, even if your finances are breaking down. You can't admit it because the world saw the performance and now expects the encore. So you dig deeper into the mask. You become imprisoned by the very image you designed to impress others. And freedom? It becomes impossible. But there is a way out. You shift your focus from how things appear to how things truly are. You start doing the work in silence for yourself. You stop measuring your worth by reaction. You start valuing depth over attention, and slowly you rebuild self-trust. Your actions speak, but only to yourself. Your progress becomes invisible until it becomes undeniable. And that's the power of inner strength. It grows in silence. It moves without noise, and when it arrives, it doesn't knock. It opens the door itself. So the next time you feel the need to show off, pause. Ask what part of you is seeking to be seen. What part of you still feels incomplete? And instead of performing, build. Instead of displaying, develop. Because when you become full inside, you don't need to rattle the cup. You carry the weight of peace. And that alone shifts every room you enter. When you stop showing off, you start showing up for yourself. You shift from noise to clarity, from performance to purpose. Because in a world obsessed with appearance, silence becomes your secret power. You no longer chase validation. You no longer fear being underestimated. You embrace the quiet strength of focus, self-mastery, and emotional discipline. And most of all, you reclaim your energy. No more wasting time proving who you are. You simply become it through actions, not announcements. Now ask yourself, what would your life look like if you stopped needing to be seen? What would change if you trained your mind to move in silence and let your results do the talking? This is your invitation to practice what we've shared. Not once, but daily. Watch this video again if needed. Let the message sink in. Then apply it, not tomorrow, but now. quietly, consistently, stoically. And if this video spoke to something real in you, share your story in the comments. What have you learned about staying quiet, protecting your energy, or mastering your emotions? Don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more powerful reminders on how to stay unshaken, focused, and free in a world that never stops talking.